Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here at Tnh T, however you call me, I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks, where we are today taking a look at the Tnh T VZ51. This is going to be a review of this vehicle, and hopefully I will not make it too long. Hopefully it's the perfect length and you guys can get all the necessary information that you need regarding the Tnh T VZ51. This is the Tier 9 Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the brand new line that has been introduced in the last patch to World of Tanks. I really enjoyed the Tnh 105-1000. I even liked the VZ44-1 when it was fully upgraded. It was a very enjoyable experience, and the same kind of counts with the Tnh T VZ51. This tank is very, very enjoyable when it's fully upgraded, and I have to say, I'm going to be very straightforward. This is probably one of the best tanks that you can have in the game right now. It's a very, very good vehicle, a vehicle that combines a lot of things that make the meta, or that are the meta in World of Tanks at the moment, and it combines them greatly into one thing. So let's take a look at the modules before we go into the characteristics, and let's talk about the specialty of the Czechoslovakian tech tree. So you have three different guns, and the specialty of the Czechoslovakian tech tree is basically that they combine firepower with the mobility of medium tanks and with the armor of heavy tanks into one category. So the entire series of tanks is rather small, or maybe they're long but not very big, they're not very tall, and they have decent armor and decent mobility. What they also have is they have choices. They have the ability to choose between two different guns. You have on the one hand a 122mm gun that is a standard gun that doesn't have an auto-loading system, and the other one is an auto-loading gun with two shells in a magazine. So that is going to be the only difference. The thing is, these Czechoslovakian heavy tanks have the ability to deal massive amounts of damage with their alpha, because their alpha is 440. They do 440 damage on per shot basis. That's the average. If you have 2 rounds that you can fire in quick succession, that can go all the way up to 1000 damage if you roll really, really well. So before we take any closer look to these characteristics and statistics, let's jump over back to the garage. I just wanted to show you guys that's the big new feature, that you have the choice of picking several guns, and it's also the same with the Tier 10. I don't have the Tier 10 yet, but I've heard a lot of things, mostly very, very good things, and mostly a lot of annoyed players that have to go up against that Tier 10. But let's take a look at the firepower tab, because right now we're running around with the magazine fed gun. It has the same alpha, 440, 252 millimeters of penetration, and it also has APCR shells as premium shells, which have about 40 millimeters additional pen. Instead of the 252, it's 295 or something like that. The reload time is actually quite good, 25.31 seconds for the entire clip or magazine, and 2.5 seconds in between the shots. So you're actually quite fast in being able to fire again when you fired first. The thing is, what is really important right here is that if you use the old turret, where you can actually, just still use the old Tier 8 turret and have the new gun, you're going to be lacking a bit in the accuracy department and also the rate of fire. The rate of fire is a bit better with the upgraded turret, also the view range. But we have to be honest, if we mount the old turret real fast, the stock turret that you have on this vehicle is really, really good. There are basically no weak spots at the top, at the front either, and it's a very powerful tank even with the stock turret. And I think that's going to be another part that we have to talk about, the state of this vehicle when it's in stock, because it doesn't feel like a stock tank. It's quite enjoyable to play when it's in a stock configuration. So the gun traverse, or the turret traverse, is 26.67 degrees per second, so it's not the best, it's not the fastest, but what you have is the protection of your turret. Your turret is very interesting, especially the upgraded turret, but we'll get to that in a second. You have 7 degrees of gun depression, That's not the best, but it's also not the worst. So you can probably make it work on certain ridgelines. Certain other ridgelines against some other tanks, such as the Kranwagen, the Emils, the Super Conqueror, you're going to have a bit of a worse time, but still, I think generally speaking, with all the other characteristics on this tank being pretty good, you don't really have to worry too much about the gun depression angles being total shit. They're pretty decent still with 7 degrees. You have 2.3 seconds aim time. Now that's with all the equipment, with the perks I have on this vehicle. I think the base aim time on this gun is 2.7 seconds. So I do get a buff of 0.4 seconds reduction, or I get that reduced. The dispersion on this gun is not very good, 0.38 at 100 meters. It's not a very accurate tank, but what I've noticed is that the accuracy on this tank, somehow they haven't added RNG on this vehicle at all. I almost always hit my shots. And if you're playing this tank as I'm playing it, as an aggressive medium to close range brawler, that dispersion isn't as important. 0.38 is not the best. Now if we take a look at the other gun, now because this is the biggest difference, I'm just gonna keep these two tabs open so we can talk about them and we can compare them. The thing is, you have 1898 DPM on the gun with the magazine. That is not very good. So you're not going to be able to get into the same spheres as the Super Conqueror with that damage output. The standard gun with only one shell and not with a magazine, it has better DPM by about 300-400 DPM because it has 2200 damage per minute. And its dispersion is better and its aim time is also better. So you have the ability to choose between those two guns. I personally, after having played quite a few rounds with the magazine system, I would, if I want to go with the maximum efficiency, I would go with the standard gun because having the ability to fire more shells, dealing more damage, kind of outweighs the ability to have 2 rounds that you can fire at a very quick kind of moment in a very short notice and do 900 damage. I much rather fire 3 shots that take about 5 or 6 seconds more and get like 400 damage on top of that. Instead of being able to do 900 damage, I'll be able to do 1300 damage. So I'd much rather pick the standard gun, but that doesn't mean that you can't have good games with the magazine gun, with the auto-loading gun. So that's the biggest difference between those guns. Let's go over to survivability. I do have improved hardening class 1 on this vehicle, and the armor is kind of interesting. The turret armor is completely broken, especially on the upgraded version. The turret armor, there's no place that you can really penetrate reliably at the front of the turret if you're firing at this tank from the front. It's a bit difficult. The cupola on this one is not very good. It's not very easy to hit. The cupola on the stock turret is not very easy to hit. And the stock turret has 270 millimeters at the front of the turret. So you have 300 millimeters with the upgraded turret. You have 150 on the side, 80 on the rear. And it literally screams no weak spots on top of the turret. I don't like this. I want weak spots on my tanks that are really, really powerful already, and they really need weak spots because this tank is incredibly strong at the front of the turret. A very good hull down vehicle, and it's too good. 130 millimeters at the front, 80 on the side, and 80 on the rear for the hull. This tank doesn't have a very good hull, but since it's so low, it can hide its hull very, very good. And also, it's angled very special. Like, it's a very nice angle that you have on this tank. So the 130 millimeters will probably be more on the level of maybe 200 millimeters thickness. It's going to be quite tricky to actually penetrate this tank when it's on the move. The lower plate is quite big if you compare it, or if you, it's okay. It's big enough. But the thing is, just generally speaking, this tank doesn't have real weak spots on top of the turret. And that's the big issue. So if you can stay hull down, this tank is very, very powerful. Let's go over to the mobility tab. This tank doesn't weigh a lot. It's, for a heavy tank, 52 tons is pretty much peanuts. You have 750 horsepower engine on this vehicle if you upgrade it, And the specific power to weight isn't too bad with 14.34 horsepower per ton. You can make this work. You can accelerate fast enough. You have 50 kilometers top speed, 50 kilometers per hour top speed. That's really good. 15 kilometers per hour top speed going in reverse. So you can get from point A to B. So your mobility is pretty damn good. The only thing that you have in the stock configuration, and maybe also the upgraded version that is a bit lacking, is the traverse speed. The traverse speed that you have is only 35.56 degrees per second, but you have to say that's how you have to balance this vehicle out. There are a lot of things that they have to do with this tank, in my opinion. I think that the gun handles really well. I have the feeling that the armor layout is too strong, and the mobility together with that, you have a really good kind of maybe too strong vehicle in the game. And that's a bit of an issue. The power creep at tier 9, power creep at tier 10, that they constantly have to up themselves one more with every single tank that they release. And I don't really like that very much. Now moving on to the last tab that's kind of important, and that's the view range. This tank has 390 meters view range with the top turret, or it was 380, excuse me. 380 meters view range top is not the best, but if you put some equipment on it, like additional view range with optics, or you train your crew, you can up that all the way to 436 or maybe even more. If you use premium consumables, you can get that higher. And the thing is, this tank can be really powerful. That's one of my biggest concerns. This is a very good tank, and it's too good in my opinion, because it has all the characteristics that are important in this game, all the meta, everything has a little cross next to it. And yeah, I don't want to play a tank that is absolutely broken, too easy to play, and doesn't have any real challenges. But the thing is, they added that, and I've enjoyed my time with this tank greatly. Now, if you think about it, like I only have 54% win rate on this vehicle. The thing is, it's not that I'm a complete moron when I'm playing this tank, but it seems to be that the one-sidedness in this game kind of continues on. You can see my destruction ratio is 2.21 for like, I destroyed 2.21 vehicles for 1 life, and this thing really does kick the hell out of enemy players. I also think that the hit points, if you use the improved case hardening, you're also going to be able to get some additional hit points and make this tank even more powerful. So what am I talking about? Am I just hyping this tank up too much? Am I too good at the game? No. Let's take a look at the gameplay, and we're going to see the strengths and the weaknesses of this vehicle, and you'll see what I mean. We're actually going to be watching gameplay of the magazine, or the automated, no, not the automated, but the auto-loading system, and we're not going to be running or watching a game of the single shots tank. So let's move on over and take a look at the gameplay. Okay, so finally, hopefully this time I have hit the record button and not the end recording button, because unfortunately I already recorded this video, but because of my sheer incompetence I was talking to myself, which is already kind of weird, but it's super weird when the microphone is not picking up any of what you are saying because you forgot to record. So I double checked, we're recording. Okay, so the gameplay I've chosen today is on the map Studzianski, which is a Polish map, and we're playing against a couple of tier 9 vehicles, but the majority of the vehicles are tier 8s. So this is a great game for us because we have enough hit points with the tier 8s and the tier 9s, and we are not facing tier 10s. So this should be a really good game. And off the bat, what you immediately notice is the mobility of this thing. As already mentioned, 50 kilometers per hour top speed, or 52 kilometers, I think. This thing can really reach the top speed after a short while, but I think the average of above 40 is still pretty good. Probably the ground resistances do play a part in that, but you can see with this mobility, you're able to get to very offensive positions very early on. I decided to go to the south in the little city down here, and there is also another option to go in the north. And the very first thing you notice immediately with this gun is that having those 2 rounds or having that magazine really gives you more flexibility in a situation like this, because we had so many targets and we were able to fire off both shots. If we were a bit more lucky with the Panzer 58 Mutz, that would have probably hit him, and that would have hurt a lot. But still, 417 damage with the first round. And the Mutz is a really, I don't even know. He seems to be a very proud and, what do you call it, brave, very brave soul. But probably on the foolish side, because he's still putting himself into danger and he's trading very, very badly with me. He just ate 2 shells and I have a damage total of 1,272. So this is a position and this is a situation you want to find yourself in when you're playing the Tnh T VZ51, when you can dictate the pace of the combat. Because if it's like this, you can reload, you can take those 30 seconds, you can reload as long as you want, and you can dictate when you want to engage these guys. And that is how you can be very flexible. But that's one of the things that you don't have. This luxury is something you don't have when people push you. When you're getting pushed by several tanks and you fire both of your rounds, you do a massive amount of 800, 900 damage, but still at the same time, they will probably eat you up because you will not be loaded in the next 25, 30 seconds. And well, in that time, they will probably have fired 1 or 2 shots off at you, at least two shots. And that's going to hurt, and you're not going to withstand that for a very long time. So that's a very big up and downside to the magazine-fed gun, because the rate of fire is just not great enough to give you the ability to fight back effectively if you get pushed in a certain position. But as I say, you can see that is a really nice thing to be able to put 1 shell into the T95 for 455 damage and, you know, just wait for 20 seconds to see if the my counterpart, the Tnh T VZ51, makes a mistake and drives forward and allows me to shoot him once more, and I get an additional 397 damage. So that's a very short time to deal about 850 damage. That's pretty damn good, if you ask me. That's definitely the strength of this vehicle, and also the turret armor. The turret armor on this thing is so strong. This is the stock turret, and the stock turret has 270 millimeters of frontal armor, and there are no real weak spots on top of it. So my biggest gripe is that these vehicles need to have weak spots. If they don't have weak spots on top of their turret, I see a very big problem coming in, that these vehicles will just be incredibly good in hull down situations. And I've witnessed that myself. So right here I make a misplay. I do advance because of the Centurion, because I want to support him. And I do put 2 shells into these guys, but yeah. Tragedy strikes, we get hit by 3 tanks, there's 1 more right there, and we lose the majority of our HP. Very quickly we lose so much HP, and it was not really worth it, because we could have still done the damage if we would have waited a bit longer. Because that T-34 and that TNH, they're both very aggressive, and we've already lost so much HP now for basically 900 damage, or not even 900 damage, about 785 damage. That was not worth it. So that brings me to the other point. This tank, at least in tier 9 and tier 8, as you could see, we were hit by a Ferdinand and a TNH-T, which is the tier 9, and the Kanonjagdpanzer, although it was firing heat. If they hit your hull is not going to be able to withstand a lot of shots. You can see once more the Kanonjagdpanzer, he switched over to APCR and he decked us right through the side. This tank is quite vulnerable if you have the hull armor. That doesn't mean that you do not bounce certain shells. Your front armor is about 130 millimeters thick. With the angle, you'll get maybe about 180, 190 millimeters effective armor. That isn't too bad, and I think this tank, from the hull armor perspective, it's probably balanced quite nicely, because it's supposed to be kind of a medium tank slash heavy tank that has, you know, some armor on the turret but not enough armor on the hull. But the issue that I have is that the cupolas on this vehicle on the upgraded turret are just really slim. They're really small, and it's basically impossible to penetrate the turret unless you're firing heat and you have more than 300 millimeters of penetration. So right here you can see we've already dealt 3,695 damage. That's because this alpha damage on this vehicle is amazing, and because no one has really bothered us with the reload. So the reload is going to be the big weak spot of this vehicle if you're running the gun with the magazine. But if you're running the gun without the magazine, your DPM is actually quite okay. You have 2,400 damage per minute if you have brothers in arms and if you have some equipment on this vehicle. 2,400 isn't too bad. That's maybe 11-12 seconds reload time, and that would in turn, if you think about it, give you probably more damage output over like 3 shells than you would do with the magazine fed vehicle or magazine fed gun. The thing is, obviously you have the opportunity to do that massive amount of damage, that burst where you fire 2 shells at them and both of the shells hit. They're going to be doing massive amounts of damage, at least 800, something along those lines. If you roll high, you can almost get 900 damage or maybe even a bit more. The issue is that long reload time, which is 25 seconds with the upgraded turret and 30 seconds without the upgraded turret, that makes you very vulnerable, so you have to be really careful when you play that kind of gun. So you have to have a bit of a different playstyle. If you're playing this tank with the non-magazine fed gun, with the standard gun, you have a lot more flexibility. You can play very aggressively and you still have very good alpha. I think your gun depression, not gun depression, but your gun accuracy is better. I think your aim time is better. So there are a lot of pluses that are coming, but one of the biggest improvements is the DPM, which is about like 400 DPM better than on the standard or on the magazine fed gun. So that's a very big upgrade. If you think about that, I would probably prefer the standard gun, but having this ability to choose between both of these guns is really cool. That's what makes this such a special kind of thing. This tank feels it just feels very competitive. It feels extremely gnarly and it feels like so powerful if you know what you're doing. Right there, we just knock out the Carnarvon, and the Carnarvon loses 460 HP. That's like, that would have taken us 2 shots at least with other tanks, and 440, getting that high roll on 460, that's pretty impressive if you think about it. So I have to say, I really enjoy this vehicle. I enjoy the Czechoslovakian heavy tank line, but that doesn't mean that they're balanced. I have the feeling that the Czechoslovakian heavy tanks so far, that they're getting better in tier, and tier 8 was already pretty impressive. It was a lot of fun. I didn't really use the magazine fed gun at all. Tier 9 now is incredible. Even in stock, this tank is a lot of fun. And when it's fully upgraded, this vehicle is really powerful. And I have the feeling that this tank is probably a bit too strong, because you have a lot of things that go directly into the meta. You have an incredible powerful gun, very high alpha damage, you have decent penetration, decent accuracy, decent gun handling, you have decent mobility, and you probably have enough gun depression for important fights, like on certain ridge lines. And I think you can really make this tank work if you are willing to learn a bit on how to get used to this auto-loading gun. At least you're not completely vulnerable like certain French tanks, but I just have the feeling that maybe this tank is a bit too good and might get nerfed in the near future. I haven't played the tier 10 yet, but I've heard a lot of negative things about the tier 10, not in the terms of performance. I've heard it's a really good tank, but I've heard a lot of negative things about the tank, that it's just too strong and that players are upset because there are no real weak spots, and getting hit for about 900 damage in 2 shells, that's going to hurt a lot at tier 10. And the thing is, I think the tier 9 is really nice. It's a lot of fun. Now we were just knocked out by the Yak Tiger over here. By the way, we're going to talk about this game real fast because I'm going to give the verdict on the vehicle in a second after this game is finished. It's just about 2 more minutes. It looks like we're going to win this game, right? We have a complete advantage on tanks. We have twice the amount of tanks. But what's really important is that we have an AFK Kanonjagd Panzer 105 and we have this T95. We just lost our Progetto 46. I wanted to say that the Ferdinand over there does play a big role. Look at the kill feed on the Ferdinand because he has a really good game. We have a T95 who cannot spot the TS5, but actually just spotted him right there. The issue is we have a T95 who's firing high explosive shells. And the high explosive shells aren't really an option anymore in the year 2021 with the patches. So unfortunately our T95 isn't as effective as he should be. I also have the feeling that the T95 player isn't very experienced in the game, and it will show in just a second because he's going to do something that I think is not the smartest thing to do in a situation like this. Because if you look at the minimap, you know there's a TS5 over there, there's a Ferdinand over here, there's a Yak Tiger in the corner down there. So if you engage the TS5 and you kill him, you're going to be able to push down south and engage the Ferdinand. So the Ferdinand pops up and our T95 probably spotted him and he's going to get shot on the side. That hurt a lot. There was a 500 damage shot, but unfortunately the T95 is turning towards the Ferdinand, giving his side armor to the TS5. The TS5 has a crazy reload. He's just going to eliminate him in a second. Thus we lost our very important tier 9 tank destroyer, and we just lost our tier 8 heavy tank that decided to rush across and try to get behind the ridgeline over here to flank around the TS5. So the Ferdinand basically just secured this entire flank, and we have lost our numbers advantage because we have an AFK Kanonjagd Panzer 105, we have a Yak Tiger over here sitting on B8, and we have an IS-6 who has decided to flank around to the south to see if he can spot the Yak Tiger. So at this moment in time in this game, it probably looks like the best way to go is to draw this one out, because winning this game is going to be almost impossible, because the Yak Tiger would need to push the TS5 and then he would need to engage the Ferdinand, while the TS5, the Ferdinand, and probably the Yak Tiger as well have shots on him. The Yak Tiger is almost full HP, so he might pull it off, he might knock out the TS5 and then the Ferdinand, but he would probably fall prey to a full HP Yak Tiger. So unfortunately, having dealt our 5,450 damage in this match, we're not going to be able to win this because we kind of died too early in a game where I thought we were going to win. The thing is, I've noticed quite often in the recent time that games have started to go very one-sided. Like a lot of games go down like 15-2 or 3. At least this game was very long, and it reached the full 15-minute timer. That's very rare nowadays. But still, like the mistakes that were made in this match are pretty novice. It's very interesting to see how players play the game. So I never expected a T95 to all of a sudden turn around and engage the Ferdinand when he knows that there is someone back here. But obviously, experience is probably the best teacher in those situations. But I'm going to use the remaining time that we have to really talk about a final verdict on the Tnh T VZ51. I think the Tnh T VZ51 is a really cool tank. I think it's really, really powerful. It's a great tank, and it has a lot of things that will make a lot of players happy. It has a great gun, it has great gun handling, it has the alpha damage, it has the mobility, it has decent armor, it has really good turret armor. Basically, this is a very, very good package. This is a package deal that players can play that never play heavy tanks, never play tank destroyer, never play medium tanks, that only play tank destroyers and want to have the high alpha. That is a perfect line for you if you want to play a tank destroyer gun on a heavy tank while still having the alpha damage and maybe even the mobility that your heavy or that your tank destroyer previously maybe did not possess. So that gives you a very, very competitive vehicle. A vehicle that I would have to say is probably too powerful, it's too strong, and it's kind of imbalanced because I think certain other tier 9 vehicles just aren't as good as this vehicle. But still, I would love to hear what you guys' opinion is on this vehicle. Tell me in the comment section below. Did you like the review? As always, like, comment, subscribe, or if you disliked it, dislike it. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one and peace out.